Hello everyone. So if you've been following our content lately, you'll have seen us talking a lot about DBT state-aware orchestration, which is very exciting and it's very cool as a feature. But ultimately, why does it matter to your team? It's going to be a very hard sell to say we just want to use this because it's cool and things go a little bit faster. You're really going to need to sell people on how it's going to make your team more effective and have to spend less time ultimately debugging DBT every day, rerunning things. So we're going to dig into a few examples of why state-aware orchestration can help your data team. But obviously, there's a lot of reasons that you'll find out for yourself when you give it a go. So first up, we have what is quite possibly the most obvious or easy to understand case, in that state-aware orchestration will most likely process far less data than running DBT as is. Obviously, this can be different depending on how much your project increments and things like that, but on the whole, it's likely it's going to reprocess less of the same data over and over, unless your project is absolutely perfect. So if we take the current example, if we had a project with just one model in it even, each time we run that, we're going to fully reprocess the source data to recreate that model. This is 5 full table scans, it's 5 full loading that into memory, it's 5 of the same thing over and over again. With state awareness, that's going to happen on the first load. We're going to create the table from scratch, but then after that, we're going to only run and increase the new data being processed. If there's no new data, as you can see on run 4 here, we're just going to skip it entirely. No data is processed, which means that run happened super quick, that run was super cheap, and we didn't consume any resources in the warehouse or otherwise that could be used to do other things. So not processing the same stale data over and over again is pretty much the headline thing here. And this is very cool for the tangible, monitorable spend and resource, but what about something less tangible? What about people time and people energy that you put into these projects? So for those of you that have spent a while in DBT, you'll most likely have used increments and found them to be a really powerful way of making your project more efficient. But these can sometimes be hard to set up. It requires a heavy understanding of the upstream processes. It can require a bit of an understanding of the syntax in DBT, and perhaps you've even had somebody who's very good at them in your team write a whole framework for everyone else to copy and paste because they haven't got the time to learn it. Well, state awareness can help relieve some of that by just making the project more efficient by default. We're not going to process new data without even incrementing that model. On top of that, the increments themselves, they're only as good as you can write them. So sometimes if your query or slash model is particularly hefty, it will end up running a whole bunch of steps to just figure out that there is no new data to process. You'll have all these CTEs that do a lot of magic, and unless the query optimizer absolutely nails picking it up, you're going to end up running queries anyway. Whereas with state awareness, it already looks upstream and decides, let's just not execute anything. And a query not executed is always going to be cheaper and faster than any query that is executed. And kind of tied into that notion of spending time managing the models, quite often as you come towards the end of a quarter, the end of a financial year, people start getting really precious about things like Snowflake spend, which ultimately leads to the team that owns the DBT project pointing the fingers at those models and saying, we need to review them. Depending on how you do that, if you're not doing it constantly, you may end up with these cleanup days or fire drills where you suddenly have to reduce the spend or time or resource used in your DBT project, which means the whole team downs tools and starts looking through each model for various refs or unused CTEs, adding increments, changing the scheduling, splitting the jobs up, checking out the different materialization options for things like dynamic tables or materialized views, and ultimately then having to document those, change all of the downstreams, make sure everything still works, and spending days and hours of engineering time sorting this out. With state-aware orchestration, it reduces that need. You're probably still going to need to do it from time to time if you've got some huge models, but your DBT project by default is going to be much more efficient. You're going to spend less time and effort running the same data, and hopefully that means these days come up less often. You're not going to have to down tools right in a busy period just to go and sort out a DBT project. And finally, one for the stakeholders, because that's what really matters. We've all had the "is this dashboard model something up to date" question. Well, this doesn't really eliminate that, but having to add things like build after configs or be more on top of source freshness gives the data team a bit more of a reason to monitor when things are being produced downstream. So I now know that fact orders is produced on this schedule because it has a build after config because it feeds this dashboard. And that can be similar for a lot of my other consumed models. So this helps the data team think a bit more like their stakeholders and ultimately creates better alignment in when that's going to be delivered. We are now literally configuring DBT to say, make sure that data set is up to date at this time, i.e. an SLA. So stakeholders are going to love that too. As an extra little bonus, because we're now saying that only needs to be updated at these times, we're also going to reduce the number of needless runs of those models. We're not going to be rebuilding marked customers every 30 minutes for some process that uses it once a day. Awesome. So those are just a few reasons why state-aware orchestration can really help your data team, but ultimately that's just our word for it. The proof is in the pudding, so go and try it out for yourself, test it on your project, see how it behaves, see how much you can save in terms of time and effort, and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.